Hello, I'm Scott Erickson with Erickson Reads. In this video, we're going to go through the day one process of the read guide. If you've not yet downloaded or looked at the read guide, I highly recommend it. It is free, available for anybody. Just go to ericksonreads.com. You'll see a link at the top for the read guide, and you'll be able to download the PDF right there. It's full of pictures and text to explain exactly what we're going to do throughout the process. Now, I should begin by saying that all of the measurements that I give in the read guide and that I'll talk about in these videos are meant to serve as a template. It's not always going to produce the exact perfect read that we're all looking for, but if you follow those measurements, you'll at least get a good start. You'll get pretty close to where you'll be able to then fine-tune things as you need to better suit your playing and the music that you're working on. With day one, we begin with a blank that is still sealed. I tied this several days ago. It is now soaking. It's been soaking for roughly the length of this video, so about a minute. But that's probably fine enough here. So here is my blank. I'll show you right here. And the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to draw with my pencil. I'm going to draw a line right down the middle where I want the spine to be. I'm a big fan of using pencil on my reads. I draw all over them. Just helps me make sure that I'm following what I want to do and that I'm getting the results that I'm looking for. So you can see that light pencil mark right down the center of the read there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin scraping the channels. So I'm going to be scraping from right about here, 4 or 5 millimeters above the top of the string. And I'm going to do long scrapes up the side of that spine. Now my goal when I'm done with both sides is to still be able to see some of that pencil marking there. Some of it may rub off as we go, and that's okay. But the goal is to be able to see some of that there, because that's the spine. We want to leave as much of that as possible, at least in this stage. We'll measure it up tomorrow in day 2. So, grab my mandrel here, and I'll begin scraping. So long scrapes from the bottom. And I'm not going to go too deep. Basically, I want to get underneath the bark. So the bark is shiny, and if you get and hard. And if you get underneath that, you'll find some softer, generally whiter colored, creamier colored fibers underneath. You'll be able to see those vertical fibers. So that's what I'm looking for here. And I'd say I've gotten just about there. So maybe a little bit tough to see in this camera view here, but I've now scraped along the side of that pencil marking. I've got the channel, it goes down to about here, all the way up through the top. And I'm trying to do an even scrape so that I'm taking the same amount of cane everywhere along this length. I'm trying to take off the same amount of cane throughout. So in order to do that, I'm trying not to scoop. I'm trying not to scoop too much. Maybe a little bit of that kind of naturally happens. But I'm trying to mostly just do a straight scrape up and down. So now I'll do the left side of this blade here. Same thing. There we go. And so now that I've done both sides, you can see that there is a clear spine right up the middle of this blade where there is still bark. I've left some bark there. You can see some of the pencil is still there as well, although some has rubbed off. But I've got 2 channels there. And although you may not be able to tell from this camera view, you should see some of the creamier colored, softer fibers. Those vascular bundles, that's the technical term there, going up and down the length of that reed. Okay, so now I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to do exactly the same thing over here. Start by drawing in my spine. Just like that. And I'm going to scrape from down here all the way up to the top. Now another goal I have is to take roughly the same amount of cane off from all 4 of these channels that we're doing, the 2 on this side and the 2 on the other. So while I'm not really counting my scrapes, I'm wanting to do roughly the same number of scrapes in each channel. So here comes the left channel here. There we go. Okay, so I've got a clear spine on this side as well, with 2 channels that have been started, that I've been scraped on. I'm trying to adjust the light here on the camera so that you can see a little bit more clearly what I'm demonstrating. Okay, so there we go. Now you can kind of see that spine a little bit more clearly right there, as well as on the other side. So we've gotten through underneath the bark. Now I'm going to put a pencil marking at 65 millimeters from the bottom of the staple. So from the bottom of the staple there, right here, I'm going to measure 65 millimeters, which is right here. And that is where eventually I'm going to want to have the tip defined, is right there. You can see that pretty clearly here. See that pencil marking. I'm also going to draw in kind of that inverted V, that little rooftop shape, that triangle, to demonstrate exactly what I want my definition to look like. And I'm making sure that the apex, the top of it, is right in that spine. Right there. So if we can see that, there we go. And now I'm going to scrape from the top to the corners, from that definition up to the corners. I'm going to do most of my scraping up here because ultimately that needs to be the thinnest spot of the reed, or is the very top edge of the tip. That needs to be the thinnest part of the reed. So I'm going to pay special attention up there. Now the goal of this part is not to make it playing thinness, although you certainly can if you're comfortable doing that. If you make it too thin, it becomes easy to take out corners in this step because it's not clipped open yet. So I try not to go too deep, but what I want to do is make it so that it's thin enough to easily clip open with my razor blade without being afraid of cracking the reed at all. So I'm going to start scraping first up at the top here, gradually lengthening my scrape to where I'm back at that definition. There we go. And I can feel that this particular reed's getting a little bit dry, so I might dip it in the water in a second here. There we go, got that one. Now I'm working on the other side here. And while I'm not focusing too much on the definition just yet, we're here, so we might as well start a little bit of a definition. In the day 2 process, we end up obscuring the definition that we do here, but might as well get it a little bit started here if we can. There we go. Okay. And now I'll go to the other side, and I'm going to draw in my definition again. So I'm checking out from both blades and making sure that this horizontal line is exactly even, because we like symmetry in our oboe reeds. There we go. Just like that. Okay, and it was getting dry, so I'm just going to put it back in the water for just a moment. And I'll take this opportunity to sharpen up my knife a little bit. Okay. Key to making a good reed is a sharp knife. Okay, so now I'll get back to where I was, which is right here. I'm going to scrape up the tip here. There we go. Okay, so I've now added a little bit of a definition to each side, and if I hold it in profile here, you can really see how thin I've made it at the top. It's pretty thin up there. Although I've been careful to try to avoid removing corners or taking too much off the sides of that tip. It's easy to do that in this stage, so don't be afraid if you have. So now, I'm going to measure again from the bottom of the staple. Measure up to 71 millimeters. So 71 for me is right here. And this is where I'm going to clip it open. I use that 71 millimeter measurement because it does get rid of a few millimeters of cane up here that I don't really want to bother with because it's never going to be that long finished anyway. But it also gives me a little bit of room, a little bit of distance between where my definition is and where I'm about to clip it open, which means I've got a little bit of room to play with. Now my reeds, ultimately when I'm finished with them, tend to be about 69 millimeters, 69 to 70, somewhere in there. So this gives me just a little bit of extra space at the top as I'm doing my scraping. So, put it here, and I look for that crossover thread. I always want to make sure that the crossover thread is up when I'm doing my clipping. And I'll clip that open right there. It's very easy to clip open because I made it thin enough. Okay, so here we have our reed with the start of a definition. The channels have been scraped up. It's got kind of a big opening, but that's okay. It's been soaking a while. So here we go. That's the end of the day one process. Now I can put it away until tomorrow. Let it dry out. The reason I do this in several different days is that there are several reasons actually. The reed tends to adjust a little bit after it's been scraped a lot, so doing it in smaller stages helps it just adjust a little bit more easily. Also, it means that I'm not spending quite so much time scraping each reed individually. If you spend more than probably 10 or 15 minutes scraping a reed, you run the risk of having the plaque in there too far and making loose sides. We'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. You also run the risk of just kind of getting frustrated with your reed and getting a little bit too attached to that reed, to where if you make a mistake, it can be really annoying, it can be really irritating. So it helps kind of on more of an emotional level to kind of distance yourself from the reed by only scraping on it for 5 or 10 minutes each day. And it also helps make a more stable reed. So win-win. Okay, so that's the end of day one. I'll put this away for the night. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow for day two's process.